As the wheel of the year turns, how do we align with the rhythms of nature to bring balance and renewal into our lives? What ancient traditions shape the way we celebrate Ostara today? What if you could reshape your reality through witchcraft, tapping into your inner power? How does one begin this journey? And what does it mean to walk the path of a witch? Welcome to the Magical Professions Podcast, where we embark on a creative exploration of mystical, forgotten, and transformational professions, those who guide, teach, and preserve the wisdom of spiritual traditions across time. Today, we're honored to welcome Lisa McSherry, an author, priestess, and leader in the Pagan and Witchcraft community. With over 2 decades of experience leading Jaguar Moon Coven, Lisa has been a dedicated teacher, mentor, and writer, helping individuals craft their own spiritual practices and deepen their connection to the divine. As the author of A Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice and numerous other works on paganism, magic, and community building, Lisa brings a wealth of knowledge on how we engage with the changing seasons. Welcome, Lisa. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you on our podcast. Can you please briefly introduce yourself and let our listeners know where you are joining us from what part of the world? Thank you.
Well, I hardly know how to add anything to your wonderful introduction. Thank you. It's lovely to hear my accomplishments like that. As you say, I've been an author and a teacher for decades now. I've been a witch for going on 4 decades, so I have a very long history and practice of being, I guess you'd say, on both sides of the learning and teaching continuum. And of course, we're always learning, right? We're always adding new skills and information to what we bring to the world. So I'm very much a part of that. And I am joining you from Portugal.
Thank you for your introduction. And can you share maybe something magical or mystical about Portugal? Because we're trying to look in this podcast at everything through the lens of magic.
Well, Portugal, as it turns out, is a fascinating country. I am a relatively new resident of Portugal. It's been about 3.5 years that I've been here. So I am very much dipping my toes into a vast, well-established country. This is an old country, which I find wonderful. I'm originally from America, which is a relatively new country, all things being considered. And I've eaten at restaurants just here in town that are older than the United States. So it's a very different world. And one of the things most people don't know about Portugal is that the original inhabitants long, long ago actually predated the Romans, who were essentially the founders of what we call modern day Portugal. And those people came from the Celtic Isles. So I'm a McSherry. There's a large number of my ancestors who come from the Celtic Isles, mostly Ireland. And my ancestors came here as well. It's fascinating to begin to connect to a whole new country where people of my blood once came. It's very thin at this point, of course, many, many, many generations. And we are talking literally thousands of years. But before Christ was born, there were Celts here, and they were founding communities, and they were actually living in the city that I live in right now, which is in the north of Portugal. And some of those customs are still here. Unfortunately, not so much with the spring equinox. I've been doing some history. They kind of have more influence later in the year because Portugal has been a very Catholic country for a long time, 1,300 years, I think it is at this point. And so many of the spring customs, if you will, are very much wrapped into Easter traditions. We'll be talking about that a little bit today, I think.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Lisa. And we are looking in this podcast at the world through a magical lens. So, what would you say your profession is within the realm of magical professions?
Well, my profession in magic is very much to be a teacher. I've been teaching newcomers to witchcraft for 25 years now. My coven's been literally was founded in the year 2000, and we're coming up on our anniversary. So I love working with newcomers. I love working with people who are just finding their way into alternative spirituality. And while my personal background and focus is what we would all call witchcraft for a variety of ways, it's eclectic. I actually don't think that there is only one way to be a witch. Far from it. I think that one of the true joys of witchcraft is that there's a vast storehouse of practices that we can all tap into and use for ourselves and move forward with to create our own spirituality within the world. And it's a very powerful, what I teach is that it's powerful, that we have personal power, that we can create new realities, that we can do wonderful things within our lives by focusing our intent and our will to create new realities.
And people have different definitions, different opinions for witches. How would you define a witch?
I think a witch is somebody who recreates reality according to their will. Mm-hmm. It's a variation of the definition that Starhawk gave years ago in about 1980, 1979. And I read it in the early 80s, and I haven't really ever changed my mind since then. It's someone who, I guess in particular, my particular flavor is someone who works with the natural energies and doesn't attempt to impose my sense of order on natural energies, but instead I have to become more fluid and more whatever the seasonal effect is to make things happen with nature as opposed to against or despite or on top of, or things like that. And I think that's a very typical scenario or how one would often describe what a witch is. And then then there's variations about how they might do that, but at its core, which is generally speaking want to work with the natural cycles, and everything else is just a matter of opinion after that. I'm also a priestess. I don't talk about that as much because that's a little bit more private and for the small community that I have within my coven and students that I've had over the years. But I do like to transmit or attempt to transmit the experience of the mysteries to other people and facilitate their experience so that they can do it themselves directly.
Also, you mentioned that a witch can create a new reality. Yes, it can be unique reality that each witch creates. And I wonder the need of a coven, of a community of witches, if everything is so individualized, why do we need to come all together? What are we looking for into these communities for witches?
That's a wonderful question. First of all, I have to say, I don't think it's required to work with other witches. I think doing solitary work is a wonderful way to learn and explore and create your own practice. I think it's great. I was a solitary for decades. I mean, like a long time. I was an adult, and I might occasionally go and do a public ritual or join with other people for a short period of time for a class or something like that. I was self-taught for decades. And I think that the most positive thing that happens from working with another group of people, whether in a coven or some other sort of longer term group setting, because covens aren't the only way to do it. You can just have a book club that meets for a long period of time and does things like that. That's just one of many examples. But when you gather with other people, one of the most interesting things that happens is that you begin to get your information from other sources, and you have a way to test the validity of what you're thinking and feeling and learning with other people's experiences. And it doesn't mean that their experiences are more valid or your lived experience is not correct. It's just you get to actually check in and, like you could all do a ritual and afterwards talk about it. Your experience of the ritual, it was nice, it was theatrical, but it didn't move me. And another person, same ritual, could just be weeping from the emotion, the energy produced, and it was transformative for some reason. So then you get to have the conversation, even if it's just in your head. Why? What happened there? What was different for them than from you? Was there a different preparation? Was it a different mindset? Was it what they needed and not what you needed? And that doesn't happen when you're just working on your own. If you don't have a great ritual experience when you're working by yourself, you just go, oh, okay, that didn't work. And you move on to something else, which isn't bad necessarily. You just never had any conversation about it, really, necessarily. And so I think that's actually the really wonderful thing about working with other people. My particular coven is deeply eclectic. We actually don't all believe the same thing. I have several people in the coven, for example, who don't even believe in deity. Like they have no concept of God. When we get together and work ritual, for them, it's an energetic, animistic sort of experience. Whereas I have a deeply personal relationship with deity in several names and aspects. So we're two sides or two ends of a long continuum of experience. And what makes it work for us is we agree what the rules are. We all went through the same class together. We all teach the same class together. We all have the same roadmap, if you will. So we know where we're going and we know what we're trying to do. And we have a deep trust of one another to assist one another to get to that place. I mean, it's community. It is community as opposed to gathering in a group. Again, there's just sort of levels of depth and continuum of experience that's in there. And believe me, we can have been practicing together for a long time. We can still have terrible ritual experiences where we all just kind of go, it didn't work at all. And no harm, no foul. We don't think there's anything wrong with it. But, we have good intent in getting together, at least. And sometimes it just doesn't work. It's just not going to happen.
Thank you. Lisa, you also mentioned that for many years you were studying witchcraft on your own.
Mhm.
And for doing the studies on your own, a person needs to have a very strong motivation. So what was that for you? What triggered your interest and
Mhm.
ignited this self-motivation and kept it for so many years to go and to study?
Well, it's very important to know that I was young when I started. I was a teenager. So my prime motivation was feeling very out of control of my life in so many ways. I mean, I was, living with my parents and hormones and all of the things from our teen years, right? That terrible, sense of deep powerlessness that tends to happen. And it was a long time ago. So there were not very many sources for learning about witchcraft. So my main motivation, what got me into it, was trying to get control over my life. When I read The Spiral Dance by Starhawk, one of many people for whom that was our gateway book, if you will, and all thanks to Starhawk. She has a line where she says something along the lines of, magic is power. With magic, you can create your own reality. You can change your life. And I read that and I went, okay, I'm in. Nothing else is doing it. So let's give this a try. And almost immediately, I began to experience positive change. It was not a night and day thing. It's not a fairy tale by any means. But I did begin to feel like I would need something and I would do magic of some variety. Very stripped down. I'm living in my parents' house. I can't have candles and chanting and all that kind of stuff, but I could meditate. I could do quiet things. I could draw an altar and think about what the elements on the altar were. And I was motivated to do that because it seemed to work. It felt like it was working. And I look at my Book of Shadows from that time, and it was working. I got very positive feedback from the universe that this was a good thing for me to be doing. And I was far from perfect at it. I mean, as a teenager, we are not very motivated when in our teen years to do much of anything unless there's a chore or money involved. But I made it to the seasonal celebrations. I had conversations. I was an adequate meditator. I did find it would help me to create silence in my mind. And then when I was out on my own, my college years and later, and I could have a little bit of space or privacy to do my own work, I was never terribly elaborate, but it gave me a great deal of satisfaction to be able to set up my altar when my roommates were out of town or away, and I was assured of privacy, and I could do something that felt a little bit more elaborate. I made my first ritual robe in college, and I was very excited that I finally looked like a witch, which I chuckle at now, but before then I couldn't look any different. The most I might do is maybe put a little special makeup on my face and draw something that I could wash off after ritual. So it was very personal. If I needed help, it was there. And so I did it. And I have to say, I was not great at it. Oh, for a given value of not great. I was a teenager. There were many other distractions in my life, especially once I found boys. But it stuck. And I could do it in my head if I had to, which made it so much more easier than like trying to go to a church or trying to get together with other people and do things. I didn't have that freedom for a really long time. It wasn't until college that I actually met other like-minded people in person, not just through my books, my 4 books. It kind of got me through for a long time. Hidden under my mattress, by the way. I was very classic.
And what were those 4 books?
They were The Spiral Dance by Starhawk, Scott Cunningham's Techniques of Natural Power, The Sixth Sense by, I want to say, Justine Glass, which was a book of psychic development techniques that I picked up. And actually, the 4th book was The Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, which was given to me by somebody, and it initially attracted me because it was very much about how you could control other people, and it was the gateway to control of your life. But what it was mostly useful for was reminding myself that I had power. because the other books weren't, other than Starhawk was good about reminding you that you had sovereignty and stuff like that. But the other ones were softer with that. I mean, they were speaking, I think, to adults who took it for granted that they can control their life. And I wasn't in that place. So LaVey's book, for all that he's a real quack in a lot of ways, helped me remember that I could make differences in how things were if I accepted that I had the power to do it. So the one good thing.
And you mentioned the third book, it was about developing psychic abilities. My question is, and this is something I think that interests many people, can psychic abilities be developed or it comes with your biology? So from your perspective, actually going through all this development, learning, and coming to the place where you have so much experience, what can you tell?
Well, I do think biology is a foundation. There are people who are absolutely better at it than others, but it's the skill like painting. I have a good friend who retired a couple of years ago and just took up painting for the first time in her life. She's amazing. You just fall into her landscapes. They're so wonderful. Me, I could barely draw a straight line. So biology does play a role, but it is a skill that you can learn to get better at. So that's what I think fundamentally. I personally am a terrible psychic. It is not in my top 10 of magical skills that I would list. I am decent at it after all these years. I know how to sense energy and help move energy in a ritual situation. I am still learning to develop my intuition. We're going on 4+ decades now of working with that. But I mean, if someone came to me and said, I am having a psychic event, I need assistance, I would not necessarily be a person that would be wanting to help them. I would help them find someone who would be better to help them because I'm just not that good. My joke is that I'm in astrology, I'm a Virgo with Virgo rising and 5 other planets in Virgo. I'm very grounded, very grounded. So I have amazing shields. I don't have to think about stuff that keeps the negative crap out. However, lifting me up into a higher plane, the etheric plane, the plane where psychic abilities work better, not so easy for me. Really takes effort and concentration and focus and all of those things. I'm better at it, of course, but I needed that book just to give me some kind of direction. And many of those skills, clairaudience, for example, which is hearing information, nope, not me at all. Not me at all. In fact, I have my deal with deity is if they really want me to get to do something, if they want me to take a specific direction, they've got to make it extremely crystal clear, like neon sign 6 foot high, clear, because I won't get it otherwise. So that's our deal.
Yes, but that's very good that you know your own skills, your abilities, and to what extent they work and what type of direction you need, even from the deities, to give you, yes, that very clear sign, so you know that it's needed and you can communicate this also clearly, which helps you in your magic. And I have this question. I'm just very curious what your opinion is. It depends on your beliefs as well. Can our skills, let's say the same skills that you learned in this life, you were developing psychic abilities, yes? Can they be transferred to the next life? And then if you work on them, improve even further. And with each new life, you would be strengthening them. What do you think about that?
I love it. I've never been asked that question in public. I am a believer in reincarnation, absolutely. And I do think our past lives influence our current and future lives. I think they're all connected. I do believe that we are all attempting to get to a state of what my younger self might have called perfection, godhood. We are all trying to improve. So we keep reincarnating to give ourselves a chance to be better people, become better people, learn the lessons from past lives until we don't need to learn them anymore and go on to a new lesson, because there's a nearly infinite set of lessons out there. All of those things I believe. So, yes, perhaps in a future life, I will learn to be psychic. It is, however, also true that there's a very strong potential that in my past lives, I was very psychic or very good at intuition or things like that, although I don't have any particular memories of being a witch, for example, in a past life. So I don't need to do that this life. This could be just the life for being very physically embodied and exploring the physical sensations that come with embodiment, as opposed to a more mental state of information processing. I think I do process my information very tangibly in this lifetime. That seems to be a common theme for how things are. So there's that. I have a hard time with thinking that our past lives and future lives aren't a progression. I'm a very linear person. So when people say, well, all time is all happening at the same moment and it's all circular, my brain just goes, nope, 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 nope. So I'm attracted to your idea of maybe you weren't so good in the past and you'll be better in the future in terms of lives. I suspect that that's not actually how it happens, but I'll let you know when I come back.
Okay. We will have another conversation then. Okay. Thank you. So you went this path from your initial interest in witchcraft with this self-motivation, finding a ways in the reality that wasn't very supportive of what you were doing, but you were finding different ways of still practice and do things. And you developed into a witch, leading a coven and being a priestess. What would you say were the most challenging part of your process of from the beginning to where you are now, becoming a witch, your journey?
It would absolutely and always be myself. I am my biggest downfall. I am my biggest impediment. Yes, the world doesn't make things easy many times, but really, like with any kind of personal development, it's our self-sabotage that gets in the way. It's not helped by living in a society that doesn't appreciate strong, powerful, self-interested women. We do live in patriarchy, most of the world. We do live in a capitalist society, most of the world. Neither of those systems are particularly interested in having individuals who are empowered. So yes, there is that overall web that we must always work with. Nonetheless, I have always held myself back. I have always been the biggest stumbling block. And it's been fascinating as I grow older and my life changes and my perspective changes to see that so very, very clearly and be able to, at this time in my life, move past a lot of the problems. So I guess what I'm talking about, and I think a lot of people who are listening would say, ego is really always going to be the biggest stumbling block. And it's fascinating to see how my ego has shifted over time, and to look back at times when I thought I'd got it all figured out and I was kind of doing great, and be like, oh, nope, you were just waiting for the next speed bump.
And what would be your advice for those who are also facing the same blocks of their ego and stumbling upon it? Maybe one advice that you can give to those who are following this path.
Oh, give yourself grace. I mean, it's always going to be different. Give yourself the time, give yourself the grace. My problem is perfection in a big way. If I'm not perfect at it immediately, I don't want to do it again. Nothing in magic happens that way. So just keep going, keep doing it. Like I said, I think the universe gives you really positive feedback when you're doing the thing you're supposed to be doing. And that's there no matter what else is kind of not going well. So when we can sort of see that, when we do the work to see that, I'm talking a lot for very simple advice. And the simple advice is it'll be all right.
That's a good one. What is magic for you, Lisa?
Magic is a profound sense of correctness. It's a click, like when you put the key in the lock and turn it. There's that tink. It's a connection. See, this is where I get a little poetical, I guess. And if you can see me, I just start to glow when I think about magic. Magic is fun. Magic is juicy. Magic is creative. So many words I'm going to use here. Again, such a simple question. Ultimately, as I said before, it is changing reality in accordance with your will. But that's a very dry sentence for the actual doing part of it. It's a practice. It's movement, even if you're not moving. Yes, I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. How do you perceive our world beyond the physical realm that we all see? Because if in your world there is magic, you should perceive it differently. So, what, in your view, in your perception, is the world beyond the physical one?
Well, that's a good one. I do see the world in very physical terms. It's kind of part of how I move through. Like I said before, I think I'm very physically embodied. So it is what I take in. So one of my hobbies is I'm a photographer. And I have decades of photos I can look back on. I've scanned all my early ones. So I just have this great body of work that I can look at. And it is very clear from my earliest pictures, you can tell my style because that's how I see the world. And as an example, when you go to a museum and you look at a beautiful painting, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, someone amazing, right? That everyone agrees is amazing. I look at the picture and I take in the totality and I love it. I enjoy it. I see the colors and the textures, and I wonder to myself what the painter was thinking or feeling when they were creating this piece. And then I will go, and there will be a small portion of that painting, some tiny detail that will just completely capture my interest. And that will be what I will take a photo of, because that was the thing that captured all of the essence for me. And I, to this day, decades old photos, I will look at and I'll say, oh, that was such and such at this time and this place on this day. So that's how my magical way of looking at the world is. I appreciate the totality. I appreciate the enormousness, what we are creating as a large group. And then I will come in to a small portion of beauty, of perfection, of interest. And that's what I will focus on. That's what I will carry with me going forward.
You also mentioned today several times that we can create our own reality. Can you talk a little bit more about that concept? What does it mean? If we just look from general perspective, we all have one reality. It's here. Of course, yes, we all have a little bit different perception on what we see, dependent on our knowledge and experience, but it's still more or less the same within certain limits. So how can we create our own reality? What does this mean?
I believe that what we're doing, how to put this, this is really good. You ask really good questions. It is partially a way of transforming how we perceive a situation. In psychology, for example, there's a technique known as reframing, where you state a situation and then you reframe it into a new way of looking at the situation, often to make it better or more understandable or to work with it in some fashion. Magic is kind of like that, but it's a little bit more active in the sense that, classic example, one that many people, this is how they kind of got into working magic in various ways. You broke. You got no money. It's dire. It's a week extra in the month before you get paid and there's nothing in the bank, that kind of a thing. So you do a money spell, quick money spell. And the next day, your boss says, hey, we didn't pay you enough last month. Here's the $50 we owe you. Great. You find a $20 bill in the street. Someone sends you a check out of nowhere because they were thinking of you and it's your birthday coming up. Okay, that's magic. You had a strong need and there was no answer, no logical answer, no realistic answer. You did magic and the answer came. What you needed came. So that's changing reality. I mean, it's on a small level, but it's a really common one. You know, someone will decide that they want to fall in love. And so they do the work, they do self-love spells, they empower themselves, they decide that they want to fall in love, but they have to love themselves first. And so they do that work, and lo and behold, they become a wonderful person that people want to fall in love with because they did the work. So it's always this sort of iterative process of deciding what you need, and then you change, reality changes, and reality changes. And then you decide the next thing that you need or such and things. So my most powerful, most recent bit of magic that I can now talk about. I don't talk about magic that's in process. That's my strict rule. I don't air that until it's well over. This one I can talk about. In May of 2021, middle of the pandemic, life is very crazy, which unfortunately feels too familiar now. My husband and I looked at each other and we said, hold on. We don't know whether either one of us is going to be alive next year or what the world will look like or anything. Why are we just in this grind of working for the sake of working? We need to get out. And so we both came together and went apart and came together in our various skill sets and ways and worked the magic to create a new reality for ourselves. And not 6 months later, we'd moved to Portugal. Okay. Now that meant moving from the place we'd lived in for 25 years, selling essentially all of our possessions, and jumping, trusting that this new thing we were going to create was going to work. And again, it is pandemic time. Who knows what is going to happen? And we did it. And it worked because we created our reality. Now, I want to asterisk this. There's a ton of privilege in there. There was decades of work that we had done unconsciously that made it possible to do this. I mean, there were many decisions that led us to our having the freedom to be able to make those changes. But we did. And we took advantage of unconscious decisions, basically, to make new ones. So big changes can happen. It does require a lot of trust. It does. But that's what I mean by magic, is you can change your reality. It's not necessarily a better reality. It is in our case, but you can change your reality. It's not always a better. I know I have someone I have known for a very long time who is one of the most amazing witches I have ever met. Her ability to do magic, to create new realities specifically tailored to what she wants. I I mean, she's the kind of person who will say, I want a new car. It will be blue. It will be less than 10,000 miles on it, so I get to have a discount on it. It will be affordable, and it will be available to me within 3 months. They're that specific in their magic working, and that is exactly what will come to them. Like time and time again, it is astonishing. However, that person also frequently finds that they got exactly what they asked for, but there was actually something better that they could have had they been a little bit more flexible and just said, I need a new car within 3 months and it's got to be affordable. Because time and time again, I've literally seen not a moment after they accepted the thing they specifically asked for, a better thing came along that they then couldn't have because they'd locked into the very specific thing. Magic is funny that way.
Yes, very specific. And now I would like to get back to something you mentioned that when you were, I think, in college, when you were trying to do your own rituals when it was possible, and you said that you were able to do seasonal celebration to go through that. So can you tell our listeners more? What are those seasonal celebrations? What are they about? What is their purpose?
Well, I'm very traditional in the sense there were always 8 for me, the 8 celebrations of the Wiccan year or witch year most people would have. I always liked the fact that you could have a party every 6 weeks. Once I figured out it was literally every 6 weeks, like that just was rock solid for me. There's something to do. And so my opinion has changed over the years. I mean, as a teenager or college person, woohoo, let's have a party. Now it's very much more, particularly now that I'm in literally a new land, new terrain. It is a way to learn this area's energy, what it likes, what it expects, what it offers. But in that order, it's very much I can't say I talk to the land. Again, that's not sort of how I operate. I attempt to. And the seasonal celebrations, a stopping point for me to look around at what's happening and make sure that I'm moving with that as opposed to against it, or if not against it, then just like stopping, being a still point when the energy is flowing, for example. So for right now, we're coming up on spring equinox and the light is changing. There's light. Light. It's not nearly as dark here as it was where I used to live in the Pacific Northwest. There was very, very long winter nights there. Here it's a little bit more equitable, but still the days are longer. You can sense that. Just this last couple of weeks, actually, the trees have started to bloom. So we're getting the cherry blossoms and the apple blossoms. But in this part of the world, or where we are in particular, the camellia trees and the rhododendrons, the camellia trees bloom almost all winter. So there's these bright splotches of pink and red and such that are all over the place. Again, in the Pacific Northwest where I was, it was green all winter, but you didn't have flowers. It was a little too cold for that. Also, huge orange production here. So there are oranges that start coming off the trees and lemons and all the other citrus in December. So again, color is happening. Amidst all the green, there's these bright splotches. Oh, and the oranges are amazing to taste. So I find myself eating a lot of orange juice and oranges during the winter where I never really did before because Florida was a long ways away, even with trucks. The oranges didn't taste that good where I was, And coming up on spring, sorry to return to that. So Easter's a really big deal here. We just had Carnival, so Lent has started. So the city is somewhat quiet with its celebrations, but the decorations are going up. And the week before Easter here, There's literally processions and parades every evening from 9:30 until midnight. They go all the way through the city and they reenact the story of Christ. They will do huge feasts, family celebrations. People close down Thursday, Friday before Easter. So it's a 4-day weekend and it's just a big deal. Very, very, very big deal. And then, of course, they have Easter Monday to recover. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating because it's like, oh, wow. And they do eggs in a big way, which is kind of funny. And they tell their stories. It's really, really fascinating.
Yes. What, in your opinion, is the mystical meaning behind those 8 celebrations? Especially knowing that they came from long history, from the pagan celebrations, and despite of all the changes, in the religion and how people are practicing, they're still here with us. So there should be something really important behind them if they're still here.
Well, eggs are, first of all, they are such a wonderful symbol of fertility. And this is the time of year when they're literally getting ready to seed the ground. So fertility is on the mind. And that very much got absorbed into, the Catholic Church just borrowed what was going on. And there's a whole thing that goes on there. But the symbol of the egg is a big European, all the way down into the Middle East. Pauline Campanelli, I have to put an asterisk on this. I have not checked the scholarship on this, but apparently in Egypt, thousands of years ago, eggs at this time of year were part of their New Year's celebration, because this is the time of year when the Nile rises and covers whole swaths of land with fertile mud. So this is when they celebrate their New Year. And eggs were part of that because they were literally, your eggs would turn into chickens. So they were holding life. So as part of their celebrations, they did in fact dye them and do things that we recognize now. It's like, okay, how is this not the same thing? So that tradition of dyeing of the eggs, of putting symbols on the eggs, the Paisansky of the Ukraine and Central Europe, long history, literally thousands of years of people have been doing that. Here in Portugal, not in modern times, but I've been told that it's a very old custom to smear a bit of honey and egg yolk on your plow before your first plow of the season. And that was a way to ensure that your crops would reproduce. And so fertility. It's just like, this is the one word that comes up when you'll do any kind of research into the customs.
Mm-hmm.
Just reading one the other day. I'm going to forget the country and I apologize. My brain's not very good for remembering some things. But there was a custom where all the boys in town, so under the age of like 13, manhood, whatever that number is, would have a contest where they would take an egg and roll it downhill. And the boy whose egg made it the furthest, I think it was a hard-boiled egg, not a fresh one, whoever won that race, if you will, would actually get to take all of the eggs. And if you think about it, for an agricultural time, yes, we're moving into spring, but we've also finished a long winter where there was no fresh vegetation or anything like that. So a bunch of eggs coming into the household could really make a difference on the health of the family. That protein, everyone gets an egg, and you could go another week on whatever scraps you were kind of getting through, because there's still a ways before fresh food is coming in. And you don't want to do much hunting at this time of year because a lot of the animals are pregnant, and you don't want to harm the herds, basically. It's an interesting time of year. It's like you are looking forward to the abundance that's coming, but you're not quite there. You're probably going to make it. It's warmer. It's not as desperate as it was at Imbolc when it was still really, really cold. You can actually see how many lambs you're going to have. You can see how many farm animals you're going to have for the coming season because they've birthed by now and they've made it through any sicknesses from youth. But all this is very agricultural in a society that is not necessarily very agricultural. So, of course, we've lost the reason why we have Easter eggs. And why there's chocolate, I don't know. I can't answer why there's chocolate at Easter, but other than it tastes good and I was glad to have it as a kid. So
You mentioned that you are celebrating now at this point these 8 celebrations of the year because you want to be in a flow with the natural energies that are out there. And now you are also exploring those natural energies in your place in Portugal. And it is a different continent. You came from America and now you are in Europe. I'm very curious, what change do you see in those natural energies, in the elements? Do you see the difference between the element of earth, water, air, fire? Because I've heard the different stories about that, and I'm very curious about your opinion. What is your impression?
it is very, very different here. I see more in the weather pattern and the light, how much light and darkness there is throughout the year. But I will say what I feel is the most different is it's a very old land. This ground is seen a lot for a long time. It's had people here for a really long time. This city is more than 1,000 years old. That literally this city, not just people have lived here, which is thousands of years old, but like this city, I can look at city walls that are more than 1,000 years old. It is both very, very settled and yet there's an untamed aspect to it, which I find fascinating, that actually does remind me very much of the Pacific Northwest, where I lived the most steady period of time in the United States. There was still a sense of wild up in the Pacific Northwest in the land itself. But where I was very close to the ocean. I was very close to water. So, and in fact, most of my life I've lived on a coast one way or the other. So I've always been around a lot of water. I am landlocked where I am now, and it is interesting. It is a difference. I'm like, I've got to travel to go to a big body of water. There's a fairly large river nearby. It's nothing like the river that ran through my town in the Pacific Northwest, for example, which got runoff from Mount Rainier every spring and would nearly flood. Nope, don't have that here. Really, really don't have that here. So it's both wilder and more settled, and it flows back and forth in this, like it really like the land wakes up in the spring and it very happily slumbers in the winter. There is definitely a sense of rest and recuperation and like, okay, let's just chill. Like we got a lot done. Let's just hang out now. And then it wakes up a little bit more. So I do notice that there's much more I've not been here long enough to really state anything definitively, but that's what I feel here, which is very, very different from other parts of Europe that I had visited very, very much. But I came to the right place.
I would like now to talk more about Ostara as a celebration. Maybe you can give some history, how it was celebrated, maybe at different time points, and a perspective on it, not so much from the social perspective, but from that mystical perspective and its meaning.
Yeah. So I touched a little bit on the history earlier, which we can trace some of the customs literally back to Egypt.
Yes.
Apparently, it's an old celebration. The spring equinox, the welcoming of the return of life, is old, very, very old. I fundamentally believe that of the 8 witches celebrations that most people know about, the 4 of the 2 equinoxes and the 2 solstices are really the ones that are ancient. Like we know Neolithic people were tracking the summer solstice, for example, or the winter solstice. These were important moments for them to mark in their year, their sense of time. And this is a really important one. It's the first day of spring, in modern times, we would say. And there's a lot of evidence that shows, particularly in the Celtic Isles and those parts of Europe, that this was when farmers would finally sort of take their livestock out of shelter, whether that was actually a shelter like a barn or a sheltered piece of land or something like that, and take it to its sort of summer grazing facilities. The newborns were strong enough that they could do a trip, that they could live outdoors. The weather was settled enough that it could kind of go. So in fact, actually, while we call it a spring equinox and we say it's these 3 to 4 days, that was just sort of their moment to start paying attention, because it might be a week or 2, a month from now, depending on how the weather was, of course. No farmer lives by a calendar. That just doesn't make sense. No small farmer, I should say. I don't know about big ones. So these are old customs of how to ensure that you lived, ensured that you got your food. I mean, all of these customs kind of here. For modern witches, I think what we can tap into is this sense of balance, this sense of equal day and equal night. It's a still point in the flow of energy through the year where we can pause and take stock. We're coming out of should have been the rest and recuperation of winter, the planning season where we got to think about what we want to have in the coming year and sort of sketch out what we want to do to bring that in, make that happen. And here at the equinox, we move from thinking and planning into beginning to do. Our first steps. How can we set our intention for the rest of the year, for the abundance of summer, for the harvest of autumn, till we come to our next rest season? So this is our time when we can just kind of go and take that breath and prepare. And I think, you can do that at the new moon every month, but because this is a larger point, a solar point in the year, there's more energy behind you to be harnessed to move towards your goals, to creating those first steps towards your goals.
And towards creating those realities, your own realities, yes?
Creating your own realities, exactly.
Yes. Are there any rituals, any approaches to celebrating this in a witch communities?
Oh, I'm sure there are. Yes, there's tons of rituals and such. Of course, my coven has one that we do. I'll give you a personal one, though, that I think makes a lovely, very simple ritual, which is based on the idea of spring cleaning. There's a reason we do spring cleaning every year, because it's been winter, our houses have been closed up, kind of a little fusty, a little musty, So I think the equinox is a wonderful time to, weather permitting, of course, open all your doors and windows. Just let it all out, and then go around through your house with a bell. You can clap your hands. And you want to just every closet, under every bed, into every corner, all the way through your house, your domicile, and wake the energy up. That's why you clap or ring a bell. You wake the energy up. Hey, wake up. Come on. It's spring. Yeah. Get it going. Let's do it. And you're also moving any negative energy out. Just push it out. Come on. We got this going. We're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That can take like 10 minutes, so you can make it really fast if it's a not great day. We've had pouring rain here, so I'm sort of like, please, on Equinox, just give me 10 minutes when it's not raining. We'll do it. But it's just so easy to do, and you can just incorporate that into, and the clapping part can be a little noisy and people might pay attention, but you can do a lot of subtlety with it, even if it's just in your head. A fan works just great. I don't have my fan handy. You don't have to actually make noise.
Mhm.
So you can silently go through and just shift it all around and keep that intent of your head of wake up energy. Come on. Hi home. Let's do it.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. And in general, everything that is related to cleaning probably are good things to do at this point. And cleaning all this energy around the house and waking it up. I really love the idea. I already did everything in my mind. And I liked your approach. The one that you just mentioned, that you can do things in your mind if you don't have other options. And you did the same when you were just getting into the rituals and you also didn't have this possibility. Can you talk a little bit more about the power of our thoughts? Why what we're thinking or we're imagining also can actually work and give some results?
Yes, absolutely. I am a big one I love my tools. Believe me, I've had my athame for 4 decades. Like, I love my tools. When we moved to Portugal, everything got packed up for about a year, and I had no access to anything, nothing. And I'd already been doing a lot of things in my imagination. I had this habit, but I had to do everything virtually, if you will, literally everything. So I was doing rituals with my coven from thousands of miles away and everything. We do work online, but I didn't have a formal altar. It was me and my desk, or me and where my laptop was set up, even more. So it was a great time to experiment because I'd had some thoughts along these lines of you can do things in your head. You don't need physical tools, physical implements. And I experimented with that. And it is absolutely more difficult. This is not something I would actually recommend a beginner do, a newcomer, because it's like digging in your garden. You can use your hands, or you can use an actual trowel or a shovel. It just makes it much easier to use a tool rather than yourself. But you can do it if you have to. And I think that's really, really important to remember. I've always been one for subtle magic. Most people who look at me do not say, oh, she's a witch. I don't wear the jewelry. I don't have the clothes. I don't do the makeup or the tattoos or anything like that, all of which is wonderful. And I celebrate the people who do it. It's not for me. I am very mundane looking, and that allows me to move through the world quietly. So there's a safety in that, and there's a security, and I offer that thought to people. But going back to the no tools, things can be written out. Things can be drawn in your notebook, and then you close. And if you have any sense of privacy, you're probably safe with that. When I left for college, and as I mentioned before, and could have my own altar, I still had roommates, literally roommates and housemates, and I didn't have a lot of privacy to be able to do anything. So what I had was a wooden box with a hinged lid, about 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet. And everything I needed was in that box. There was a little cloth that went over the top. There was a little glass. There was a little incense holder. There was a candle in a holder. And there was a feather and my athame. And I would take it out, set up my altar, do my work, close it all up, put it back in the box, and then put that box away, open the window so they couldn't smell the incense. That was it. And so that sort of started me, because you have to do a lot of preparation when you have to be efficient, when you have to be quick with things. If you've only got a half an hour of guaranteed privacy, you're not going for an elaborate ritual.
Yeah.
So you have to think about what you really want to have done, what you really want to accomplish. And that often means writing it out, drawing it out, really thinking it through and being very clear what steps you want to go through so that you could just go right through them and get them done for privacy and such. But also, my major work has been doing magic and ritual online for 20 years, long before everyone came on board with the pandemic. I've been working ritual and doing magic online. So physical tools take on a very different reality because each person doing the ritual in my group has their own tools, has their own setup, is in their own space. So there's a lot more imagination involved, a lot more visualization, a lot more working in your head to make it all happen. A lot of merging of all of our realities into a shared reality to make something happen. And it's harder. I always say this, I make no bones about it. I've done plenty of physical ritual. It's very different. It works. It's great. Yeah, I'm not sure I answered your question. I might have wandered a little bit on that one. I'm sorry.
You did. You absolutely wonderfully answered. And this also resonated with what I've just heard yesterday. I was recording a podcast with a person who calls himself a witch doctor, but he's an educator. He educates people about witchcraft. His name was Ali Cardinali. And it was so interesting to see that actually he teaches Italian magic. This is his ancestry is coming from. And I was very surprised because I thought that after all the burning of witches, there will be not much of Italian magic left. That's actually the first time I've heard about this type of magic. And what he told me about is exactly about this subtle work, about the privacy. And so it's a type of magic that nobody even would think you are doing anything. If you are going to a well, no, you throw just a rock there. No, who would think that you did something if you just throw a rock? Or you are working with spiders. Spiders are bringing information here and there or something like that. And spiders are everywhere. And the same that you mentioned, you are not wearing some jewelry or something that would be telling everyone that you are doing magic. The same is there. And actually, he was trained by his grandma. This is from who was teaching him. He was trained by her to be very nice to people. He feels very warm, very nice. Everyone feels very friendly around him. And again, people would never even think that he's doing magic in anything like that. But even if they learn, okay, yeah, he's a nice guy. He's just doing something on hobby and whatnot. And all these approaches of the subtlety of this desire for privacy, doing something very quick, very unnoticed, this all help this magic to survive to this day. So I think you touched upon a very important topic speaking about this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, I think actually tying into that a little bit, one of the easiest ways to work that way is with what we would call kitchen magic. Because, it's you in the kitchen. All right, just make sure you're stirring clockwise or counter for different kinds of things. What herbs are you putting in? Are you thinking about those herbs in terms of what they add as opposed to just instead of just flavor? Oftentimes they go the same. There's a reason for that, I think. Someone asked me the other day what my favorite, most persistent superstition is, and it's very much tossing the salt over the left shoulder when you spill it. That came from my grandmother, my Polish grandmother, actually, as opposed to my Irish grandmother. My Polish grandmother is also the one who gave me my favorite piece of good luck magic that I love doing when someone has a new home. I always give them olive oil, honey, and salt. Because if you have those three things in your kitchen, you will never go hungry. You will always have good luck and you will always have wealth.
Oh.
She told me that I'm 10 years old or something like that. I don't know, just in one head out the other, except it stuck.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
because she always used to do that when her friends would move and such.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's a wonderful memory. And it also reminded me of one thing that I've heard from one lady, a mage. She said one time that while you are just drinking your tea and mixing your sugar, the witch is sitting and stirring the hurricane or something. Yeah, so it's what is that subtle message that you put into what you're doing. Yes, so doing things with the intent, like you said, kitchen magic. Yes, when you are stirring those ingredients, are you thinking about them? What do they mean? So everything becomes more meaningful, every action.
Yes. And that's part of what can create a daily practice. It's literally the shift in your focus and your attention on it. And I guess going back to what would I tell someone who is maybe just starting out, it doesn't have to be big and elaborate or time consuming. I wish for everyone more free time and luxury than they have, period. That's a blanket wish for the world. Nonetheless, we do not need to have all of the things to be good witches. We do not need to spend hours at our craft every day. I've had a lot of mothers of small children as students over the years. Frequently for them, the only free time they have, private time that they have, is when they take a shower, bathroom time,
Okay.
going to the bathroom or taking a shower. So I'm like, okay, can you take 5 minutes of your shower and clear your head and just be quiet? Because that's meditation.
Mm-hmm.
That counts.
Yeah.
You know, if the only time you can meditate is on the toilet, so be it.
Yeah.
Let that be your quiet time until the little fingers come under the door. Mommy, mommy.
Yes. Thank you very much for those suggestions. Actually, that was my question. If you have anything that you can tell for people who want to start exploring themselves in the field of witchcraft, so what would that be?
It would be very much, you don't have to be elaborate about it. And there's too much information online. There's too much. There's too many opinions, too many stories, too much crap. And I say that as someone who's been online for decades, but it can be overwhelming. So don't get caught up in that. Just use discernment, start slow, build your own practice. I want people to build their own practice. I want them to get interested in traditional established paths as well. Like, know what you like first and then go do that, or do that for a while and then leave and go do something else. We're not stuck. There's no one true way. There really isn't.
Yes. How can our listeners learn about what you are doing, find your books, and maybe connect if possible?
I can always be found at my website, which is very easy. It's lisamcsherry.com. You can find my email there, contact information. I have a blog I post a couple of times a month and a newsletter, all that don't repeat each other. It's original content. I'm on social media. You can usually search my name, you'll find me. But as you mentioned at the beginning, my most recently published book is A Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice. That's through Llewellyn. That can be found in any bookstore. I have a new book coming out actually at the end of this year, A Traveler's Guide to Making Magic, which is, as far as I can tell, the only book ever written about travel magic.
Yeah.
And it is a whole book with all of the things you need to know about working magic when you travel, when you leave your home, because travel is not just big international trips, it's down the road.
Yes, I already saw that book and it's available for pre-order on Amazon. I checked it out already. Thank you so much for mentioning that. And as we're nearing the end of our podcast, of course, we covered quite a few questions, but if there is something that maybe I haven't asked you and you would like to mention, to share with our audience, that's the best time to do it.
The world is a little extra crazy right now, and I wish for everyone the ability to have some quiet, be able to take care of themselves, and enjoy life just a little bit more than it feels like you can.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It was such a great pleasure to have you on our podcast. I appreciate all your insights, and our listeners, I'm sure, will appreciate that as well. And we also wish you all the best and tuning in into those amazing energies of your new place. And we're looking forward to your new book and hopefully coming again on our podcast in the future. So thank you.
That would be lovely. I really appreciate it.
Dear listeners, I hope you found our Magical Professions podcast episode insightful. As we concluded, I'd like to extend a heartfelt invitation to all of you. Your stories, encounters, and knowledge are invaluable to us, and we want you to be a part of this mystical journey. Have you ever had a brush with a magical profession, a strange encounter, or stumbled upon hidden knowledge? Do you possess ancient scrolls, widespread tales, or first hand experiences that you believe belong in the spotlight? Are you aware of a sci fi or fantasy book or a movie with magical professionals in it? We want to hear from you. At Magical Professions, we cherish the power of collective wisdom and the magic of shared experiences. So don't be shy. Reach out to us with your stories, sources, or any information about magical professions you would like to share. You can connect with us via email at magicalprofessions@gmail.com or through our social media channels. Your contribution could become the heart of a future episode, and together we'll weave an even richer tapestry of wonder. Thank you for joining us on this mystical journey. Remember, the magic is not just in the stories we tell, but in the connections we make. Until next time, keep the magic alive, and may your world be ever more enchanting. I can't wait to hear from you.